Welcome. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. I like to start on time because I know everyone time is valuable, and especially when we have a couple of people that have shown up on time, we don't want to keep them waiting. We want to move forward with the webinar, and I have quite a bit of information to share with you. So I do want to get started on time. So in about another minute, we'll get started. But welcome to the Property Management One-on-One webinar hosted by Strive Wealth Builders, a platform for real estate investors, as well as SWB Delivers Outreach Program, which is a service for um, uh, homeless people, those that are low income looking for housing, as well as job training and services, uh, financial literacy programs, as well as affordable housing. So I will give you more information on how to connect with us as we get started with the webinar and a few more seconds here as people start to chime in, come into the room. I welcome you on this beautiful Thursday evening. Um, and it's 6 o'clock here. If you are joining us from out of state, I'm sure there's either a 2 to 3 hour time zone difference. And so I thank you for joining us. So we're going to get started. Welcome to Property Management Webinar, again, hosted by Strive Wealth Builders, as well as SWB Delivers Outreach Program. Please visit our websites at strivewealthbuilders.com or swbdelivers.org. Now, this webinar is for anyone that's looking for a career choice in property management, which I highly recommend. I've worked in the industry for 30 years, a little bit more now, and I just want everybody to look at a career in property management and or as an investor. This seminar is also will benefit landlords, especially if you're a new landlord. I'm going to go over a lot of basic and fundamentals of property management, so that'll be very handy and helpful for you if you're a new landlord or if you are an investor. You may also be all three. You may be a property manager or interested in the property management industry. There's several different areas that you may be interested in. You also could be a landlord. You own your own property and you're also an investor. So maybe you own your own property, you may house hack, or you may own a single family, a multifamily, or some other type of housing property type. So we'll go over some of that. And you may be an investor where you're looking for passive income from property management and or from the field of investing. I'm going to introduce myself in just a few minutes. However, before I do that, just a few requests, if I may. If you have your cell phone or if your television is on or anything like that, can you just turn those things off? Let's have some attention here. I get real jealous. I want all of your attention. So if you have any of those devices, please take the time to just shut off those devices um, and talk about property management. And if you have any questions or so on, we're going to get to that in a little bit in the chat room. So we're going to use the Q&A and we're going to use the chat room if you choose to. Otherwise, you can just sit back and listen to me, and I'm going to drop in the chat in a little bit a link where you can have a copy of this presentation, and you can write your notes on it, or you can have a notepad, or we're recording as well, and maybe you can go back to the website for Strive Wealth Builders where we'll post the webinar, and you can take a look at it again. My name is Detra Harris, and I am the president of SWB Delivers Outreach Program. Again, we're a nonprofit. We service the homeless population. We are housing case managers for low-income families seeking affordable housing. We also provide job training in the property management industry, and we provide affordable housing. as well as financial literacy programs. So please visit our website. I'll give you that information toward the end of the seminar, of the webinar, excuse me. And please feel free to reach out. We love to connect with you. Some of my certifications I want to share with you. This will kind of give you an idea of why am I such a property management junkie and a real estate junkie and so on. I have quite a bit of history in managing properties, and I started fix and flipping, and I was working in property management industry. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story as we go move through the slides here, and you become familiar with it. Um, so I'm a California real estate license agent. I don't hang my license with any brokers, but I do maintain my license. I think it's very handy and helpful to stay abreast of the laws, all of the new different changes that happens in our real estate markets. And so it just benefits me to continue to renew my real estate license. And who knows, maybe I'll use it one day. But I don't use it in terms of representing anyone to purchase property. I'm also a tax credit specialist, a TCS. You might be familiar with that designation if you are from the affordable housing community and you've heard of tax credits. Usually, tax credits managers must be certified to be able to understand the language for tax credit properties, be able to monitor the compliance for tax credit properties under LIHTC. So that's a specialized area, and I am certified to do that. I'm also certified as a COS, a certified occupancy specialist, and that's HUD certified. That's typically certifications to manage project base, which is also Section 8 housing. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. So I'm certified to manage those types of facilities, as well as a CCAM, a California Association Manager, and that's to manage associations. Um, uh, and a lot of us HOAs, or you'll hear homeowners association. So there is a designation and certification to manage HOAs. And so I also have that certification, as well as we have the MHS, which is multifamily housing specialist. And that's one of my areas. My favorite areas is multifamily. And I love the multifamily industry, and especially with managing the multifamily properties. Lastly, you may have heard of IREM, Institute for Real Estate Management. If not, please look them up. They are one of the top real estate education associations and courses in the state. Highly recommended. And their certifications are usually a stepping stone in your career in property management. So I highly suggest that you do that. So thank you, a few folks that has come into the room. What I'm going to do now is drop in the chat a link um, that you can download. I just dropped it in the chat so that you can download this presentation. And again, feel free to use it at your leisure, write your notes down and so on and so forth. So thank you for joining me for those that just popped in. So the topics I'm going to cover include standard types of properties, careers and pay scale. I'm going to go over some specialized staffing agencies, talk a little bit about rent control and the rent board and what that is, fair housing laws, and we'll move into some Section 8 housing. Uh, we'll talk about the eviction process and preventative maintenance and what that means, hiring contractors and some on-site resident managers, and what that life looks like for on-site resident managers or those that manage on-site resident managers. And then we'll talk and end with property management companies. Again, just as a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A after each topic. That's when I'd like to address any questions. And also, do not put your questions in the chat. Um, put them in the Q&A, that's better. Another disclaimer that I must do, because we are talking a lot about laws and regulations and regulatory agreements, and I want to make sure that I disclose that I am not an attorney, I'm not a CPA, an insurance professional, or a tax planner. Um, I'm a housing provider, and I have quite a bit of experience in this industry, and I'm sharing some of that knowledge with you. However, if you are a landlord, if you are an investor, then I highly suggest that you talk with a professional. And if you have any questions that's related to any laws or regulations and same similar subject matters. Okay, well, let's get into it. So I'm going to talk today about a few property types. Types of property management are residential, commercial, and industrial, and special purpose. Now, for those of you that are investors, landlords, or just seeking a career in property management, a lot of times we don't think about all the different areas that property management serves. And if you really look at our economy as a whole, we have land, we have property. So on everything that we do is either land or is property. So it's just different types of properties. And so I think it's very interesting to look at it because oftentimes we talk about residential and in our platforms. If you are affiliate of any type of real estate investing team or club or meetup or some or similar, often we talk about residential property management, which includes single family homes, vacation properties, multifamily residences, townhomes, condominiums, apartments, manufactured homes, REOs, which are foreclosed properties, a lot of times owned by the banks. These are the typical standard residential property management areas that you may think of. But we also have commercial. We have our public um, uh, accommodations, libraries, any public facility that you may walk into, all has uh, property managers managing those properties. Retail, the malls, the strip malls, restaurants, gas stations, office buildings, brokerage firms, physicians, medical office, dental offices, co-working spaces. They're all commercial properties. We'll talk what's a gray area for a lot of people that I want to address is residential. When we talk about multifamily, there's multifamilies. Multifamily can also be multifamily is also considered commercial. So what identifies the two from residential and commercial is 4 units or less kind of falls in the residential area, and 5 or more units falls in the commercial uh, uh, area for multifamilies. So that's a lot of times we get confused about that because when I attend certain webinars and trainings, we don't talk about that. But that's really a huge distinction that if you are managing multifamily housing, you should know the difference between the two, specifically if you are investing into multifamily. Next, we have industrial. That's your factories, heavy manufacturing plants, light manufacturing plants, food, you know, Amazon and those types of things, Google headquarters, and so on. A lot of them have industrial spaces, warehouses, and distribution facilities. And then we have our specialty property management areas like theaters and sports arenas, resorts, senior care facilities, assisted living facilities, schools and universities, places, churches, places of worship. So if you really look at it again, I have to admit, and I find it so very fascinating that everything is either land or property, and it must be maintained, it must be managed. So let's go a little bit deeper into these categories. So we talked about the standard types of properties. Now, what I want to point out, and I underline this, is the laws governing property management vary according to where you live. That's really, really important because if you choose For instance, Strive Real Estate, where we hold our multifamily assets, we are present and we operate in 3 markets in 3 states. So we're California, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. And there's different laws for different states. So we have to keep abreast with all of the laws according to the states. Um, and in some states, real estate agents can be property managers only if they hold broker's licenses. So it's really important to know if you're going to help someone else manage their property, if you're self-managing your own property, what the certifications will be and what the licenses should be and so on. So what actually is a property manager? Now, landlords who invest in properties may need help. That's what we hear a lot about, and they hire property managers to handle the work that comes with renting out their properties. However, many landlords do not live near their properties or they own several units, so they chose to hire a property manager or a property management company. A lot of times we hear property management companies, but also landlords can hire a property manager and not a property management company that provides the full services. They may decide that they only want partial management services, and they'll take care of some other responsibilities of the site. And that helps them to reduce their overall cost, and then they can get more cash flow if they decide to go that route too, as well. We own and manage at Strive Real Estate. And so, because I have such an extensive background in management, it just makes sense that we purchase and we manage as well. Some of the very common tasks that property managers cover, and which you may be very familiar with, of course, is collecting the rent. Can't manage anything without the money. You can't pay any bills without the money. So usually collective rents is number one. And a lot of times when we see property managers, if you live in an apartment building, sometimes we put property managers in a box where that's all they do. But they do so much more than just collect the rents. But we know collecting rents is very important because that's how we manage the property and that's how we pay the bills there. And that's how landlords are able to get cash flow so they can pay their bills as well. So they collect the rents. A lot of times they make mortgage payments. You can determine if you like to make your own mortgage payments or if you like your property manager to handle that. And sometimes when you have a property management company, they have an accounting department and they handle if you want the full service, they'll handle making all of your, not only your mortgage payments, but they'll also pay all of your expenses on the property. And then you'll just, receive your cash flow at the end of the month or the quarter, depending on your property management agreement with them. They'll coordinate repairs and complete your property inspections, and they'll communicate with your tenants. And usually that's number second, collect the rents and communicate with your tenants. So a lot of property managers are not property managers, but landlords and investors, they would prefer not to have to work with tenants and interact with tenants. And for me, I've done it for so long that my property management have to ask me, not to communicate with the tenants. So I just happen to enjoy property management industry, but we also get a lot of um, um, complaints. And property management is a highly stressful industry. But if you're detailing, you're organizing, and something you love, go for it. So property managers, again, I want to stress it. I'm going to stress this a lot, is the property manager ensures that the property and the owner follow relevant laws and regulations. I say that because there's heavy fines that's associated if you don't follow the laws and regulations, and you don't want to go down that road. It can be very costly. Um, so we just went over an overview of the 4 types. I'm going to point out here, I see a duplicate here, but the first we talked about was the residential property management. And I mentioned that that's typically 4 or less units falls into the residential property management field or space, shall I say. And for the commercial property management, that's commercial property. We went over that, and that is non-residential properties. It also includes multifamily of 5 or more units, That's also considered commercial property. The next one was this is a duplicate, but the next one we talked about was industrial communities and industrial spaces, warehouses, and so on. That's considered a specialty as well in property management. And lastly, according to the Small Businesses Administration, when we start talking about specialty property designated for use, that's your churches, and your hospitals and similar spaces for specialty properties, hotels and so on. So when you think about a career in property management, you think about, okay, where does my passion, where does it fall? Do I want to work on site with the tenants that's there, or if you're in an office space, you want to work with small businesses that's in the office space, or if you want to work with larger retail um, um, management, such as well, McDonald's owns their own, but they still have a property management experience, but um, restaurant chains, Starbucks, those strip malls, things like that. That also requires a property manager for those types of properties, and all across the board. And so sometimes you have a passion for working with certain industries, and I suggest that you pick an area that you like and then look at starting there. But the very entry level to property management is what we call leasing. That's where I started over 30 years ago. I started as a leasing agent in this space. And leasing agents, they can do very well because the big salary, or the addition to your salary, are your bonuses. For instance, it really depends on the size of the apartment complex. If you are a leasing agent for an apartment building that's about 100 units, you'll get a salary and you'll get a bonus on each apartment that you lease. And so that adds up pretty quickly when you are in a large community and you're turning units and you're moving families in. That commission adds up really well. So the average base salary for an entry level for a leasing consultant is 30 to 40,000 a year. And then there's different levels. You have experienced leasing agents. A lot of times they work for market rate apartment complexes in really high-end areas such as San Francisco or over in Marin, in the Bay Area. Leasing agents there make quite a bit of money annually, and really great bonuses. And if you go to the regional level where you move into the corporate office and you're managing a portfolio of apartment buildings and leasing agents, then you can really move into the six figures there. And again, we talked about the types of bonuses that you can make on your salary for leasing agents. So not only are the leasing consultants, that's the entry level to this industry, it's very lucrative. It can be financially if you position yourself in this industry. And that's typically where you want to start if when you're getting a feel for the property management world and the space. Next, from leasing agent, you usually move up to an assistant community manager. That's what I did too. I moved up all the way. I wasn't in labor. I didn't do maintenance. We'll talk a little bit about maintenance. But if you enjoy administration, operation, and so on, and maybe you want to work your way up into uh, uh, the corporate office, then leasing is a good way to enter into this industry and then work your way up. So I did the same. I moved from leasing agent to assistant community manager, and you can see some of the salary. You can make up to $50,000 or so with that, and you also get bonuses typically as assistant manager. And you are an assistant manager to the community manager. And I'm talking about on site. And on site, usually when you have several units where you need an on-site staff. So usually 100 units more. A lot of times I may see part-time staff if you have somewhere between 20 to 60 units. So it really varies per property in the area and the location. But on average, we have a community manager. A lot of times you may not have a leasing agent, depending on the size of the building, but you will have a community manager because in California, it's a requirement that if you have 16 or more units that you're required to have on-site staff, either maintenance or community managers. Community managers vary. It's really depending on the size of the units. As you can see here, there is, but it's a pretty good range. Under 150 units is typically between 43 to 60,000. And then you can see on my screen here, it can move up if you have over 450 units to 95,000. And as a regional manager, usually you move into the corporate level and you can make six figures up to maybe 145 to 150,000. And of course, you have bonuses. I don't see bonuses quite often in affordable housing market, but very, very popular in the market rate housing. The entire management team receive bonuses because they keep the investors very happy by leasing up and keeping their properties well maintained. Um, Okay, for all positions, some employers offer a rent reduction or 20% more in addition to a housing units. It's very popular that if you are on-site manager, you are provided with a salary and you also get a unit to live in, typically a 1 or 2 bedroom unit that comes with the job. So that's a very attractive uh, uh, job as a resident manager, which I also was a resident manager living on site. So there's pros and cons to living on site with your tenants. Yes, I will admit that. But if you are a good property manager and you um, are good with your tenants and enforce the laws and well maintained and so on, life is so much easier for you because you don't have those knocks on the door at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, as a lot of people may think, because your building is under control and your neighbors and your residents are also under control. Um, okay, moving on. So we have our offsite. Let's talk about offsite property managers. These are managers that don't live on site, but they're still considered the property manager and they're responsible for the operations of the building. They usually make a little higher salary than your on-site managers. Now, keep in mind that on-site managers usually get that unit. So they add when corporate America is adding up the salary, they are adding in the cost of the unit. So the monthly rent on the unit is added to your salary, and that's how they base your salary. That's why you have that difference. When you're not offered a unit, your salary is a little bit higher. It can be substantially higher, actually, from 79 to 140 a year. If you are handling a portfolio manager, is 2 or more properties. So if you're managing 2 or more properties, you're considered a portfolio manager. On average, property management companies, the really large ones that you may be familiar with, I know in the affordable housing world, which I'm in, so you may hear Mercy or an EAH or Eden Housing and the larger ones. But also you have FPI management. They manage, I used to work for them. They manage not only market rate, but affordable housing. Uh, and other property management companies, they will have a portfolio manager, and typically those portfolio managers manage uh, as little as 5 to 12 properties. Um, so again, as a resident manager, I moved into corporate America as a portfolio manager and managing portfolios of properties. And I also moved into the senior director position, making six figures, which you can make up to at least up to or more than 200,000 a year as a senior director. And then there is the director of property management, and this is all corporate. These are all corporate titles that we don't often hear about. And so you can see that you can really make a good living in terms of income in this industry. And then to the right of my screen, we're going to talk about your on-site maintenance. Of course, you need your maintenance staff that's going to help you maintain the property. We call them porters, which is another word for the janitors. And that is if you are a labor, if you want labor jobs, or if you are really handy with your hands, and that's the space you would like to work. The entry level to maintenance would be a porter. And then from there, you would move into a general maintenance technician position. And you'll notice I put an hourly there because that that industry or that job title for general maintenance tech, you will see it's based usually on hourly rates and not salary. So that's why I put that there. Maintenance supervisors can make up to 100,000 a year, and directors of maintenance can make up to 125. We also have the corporate office. So if you're a developer, if you're an attorney, accountant, or if you're in finance, you can be the CEO or the VP or COO. All of these titles are lucrative in property management and the corporate offices, human resources, compliance, and so on. So there's a lot of ways that you can break into and move into the property management industry. And I'm hoping I'm going to, I'm not talking too fast, but I want to make sure that I get in because I have a lot of information um, to talk about. Okay, so I just have one question here. Just want me to drop in the presentation in the chat. Okay, let's see. Wonder why that is happening. Just give me 1 second. Let me try that again. Okay, I just dropped the link into the chat for those that need to get a copy of the presentation. Okay, so I'm moving on to staffing agencies. We all may be familiar with staffing agencies, the temporary agencies that we hear a lot about, Nelson and all these other temporary agencies, but we rarely hear about the, if you would put all your questions in the chat, please, and then I can get to your questions if you just put them in the chat. Okay. I have someone that's raising their hands. If you could drop your, Carla, if you can drop your question in the chat, that would be great. I can't see your hand being raised if you're raising your hand. Sorry, I don't see that on my screen. Okay. So moving on, staffing agencies. I'm also going to put a couple of links to staffing agencies that specialize in property management that you may not be aware of. One is J. Williams Staffing Agency, very popular staffing agency in our space of property management. And the other one is Renoir Staffing Agency. J. Williams is located, I believe, some in Concord, but they have a few locations. I think they're also in SoCal. Renoir is in Alameda, and they also have a few other locations. And while let me do that uh, while I am on that, and hopefully you all had you were able to get the copy of the PDF for the webinar. So I just put the link also for Memoir Staffing into the chat, and then I want to drop also the link to Jay Williams in the chat, so you'll have access to that. Give me 1 sec here. All right. So I just put that in chat for your reference. We also have we have community staff and resources, and they're also another property management staffing agency. Now, when I say specialized, that's what they specialize in, property management. So that's where they'll place temporary, you can have temporary jobs or permanent jobs, just similar to your average employment agency. They do the same thing. The only difference is they specialize in the jobs that I just went over, some of those careers. They specialize in placing those types of careers in the property management industry. And then we also have a new company called the Liberty Group. I just threw them in there because I've heard through kind of the grapevine that they are now positioning themselves a lot more in the property management world. So let's get into some specifics. If you are either a landlord or if you're an investor, if you're considering managing your own property, these are some of the things you want to look at. Um, I talked about earlier that be sure to look at the laws and regulations for the state that your property is located in, or if you're looking at hiring a property management company, then you want to make sure wherever your property is located that you understand the laws there. I highly suggest that you do not solely depend on your property management company to understand the laws on your behalf, although they should know that, but you should also know, and that gives you leverage in working with a property management company to ensure that they are well taking care of your property. So it's important that you understand the property management laws in your state or where you're investing. I'm going to talk about California because we have that's one of our markets, so I'm going to focus on California. But please look up um, or talk with your attorney about the laws in your state. I can't express how important that is. So in California, rent control is very popular. As you can see here, I have several cities that are rent controlled, and California rent control is governed by the state, and the state law called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act applies to single family homes. I won't get into to a lot of that, but feel free to look up what that is, Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. A lot of owners are not familiar with that ordinance for single family homes. And so they think that single family homes does not apply a lot in rent control um, laws, but under the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, it does. Um, so rent control prevents landlords and counties from landlords predominantly and other investors from increasing the rents where it's not affordable. Because have a housing crisis, this is a very hot topic right now, specifically in California, rent control. So the rent control ordinance limits how much a landlord can increase the tenant's rent each year. And this does not apply to vacant units. So once one of your units becomes vacant, you can place rents at the market rate at that moment. But if you have a tenant that's occupying the unit, you have to abide by the rent laws. And that happened in 1995, where the law prohibits cities from applying rent laws to condos and single family homes. Now, remember, I just mentioned the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. That can be very confusing because there are laws regulated for rent control for condos and single family homes. So that can be very misleading. So look up that ordinance before you decide to increase any rents on your units that are occupied in California. There are even more rent laws. We just went through the moratorium, and when we went through COVID, and a lot of landlords actually went into foreclosure because the tenants wasn't paying their rents. And we're just kind of recovering from a really awful time for everyone through COVID, not only the tenants, but for the landlords too. And we're still recovering from that. Um, and so there's a lot of issues there, but I just say that please look up your laws. Next, we want to talk about fair housing and how important fair housing laws are. You'll be surprised, literally, of how many fair housing complaints are submitted to HUD every year for discrimination based on disability, discrimination based on race, color, and all of the above. We know the drill. So it's very important to follow your fair housing laws. So I'm going to give you an example. For instance, and I run into this quite often. If I go on Craigslist, because we place low-income families in housing all the time, so I'm surfing the net and ads all the time, and I see so many violations, specifically on Craigslist. If you are advertising your unit, you have a single family home or you have a duplex, or if you have a fourplex and you're renting that unit out and you put it on Craigslist or any public uh, service where anyone could actually apply for your unit. They have Hot Pass. We have Trulia. If it's on Zillow, there's a lot of different social media platforms, Facebook. If you advertise your property on one of those platforms for anyone to apply, meaning it's the public, you cannot discriminate and select who you want to live in that property based on the way they look, you know, based on their gender or any of that. It's against the law. So if you don't want to, I'm not an attorney. Let me make that disclaimer. But don't put your property, don't advertise it if you feel that way. Okay, if you want to pick and choose, you want to move your family in or somebody like that, your friend, then you do that and don't advertise your property because you're putting it out in the public and you must give everyone the opportunity to be fair, to apply and go through the same process. First come, first serve by applicant and so on and so forth is very important. People will report you and there are heavy fines behind that. So I'll leave you with that one. Let's be fair out there to people when they're applying for housing. And if you decide that you don't want to do that, then don't advertise your property in the public at all. You can't put no flyers up in the laundry room, flyers up around the community. All of that is in the public and you're advertising and you have to follow the laws. Moving on to Section 8. I use Section 8 in this webinar because it's the most popular and the most familiar that people hear. People are very familiar with Section 8. But I'm going to go over just some ins and out of the Section 8 program for those that are open. Well, in California, you cannot deny anyone for Section 8 anymore. It's a new law that came out maybe a couple of years ago. So there's no more that. I see that a lot too in ads where it say no Section 8. You can't do that. That's against the law. You can't say you don't accept Section 8. So no more of that in California. Nonetheless, we not only have Section 8, we have Section 811, we have Section 202, we have Section 236. We have several sections from HUD, and these are all subsidy programs. Section 8 is the most popular program, but Section 202 are for seniors. Section 236 is for disabled and seniors. They have Section, I forget what it's 15D or something for youth. So HUD has hundreds of programs, but Section 8 just seems to be one of the very popular ones that we kind of stick to. And there's a lot of benefits from the Section 8 programs. And there's two types of Section 8 programs. So we have what we call a tenant-based, we might hear housing choice voucher, which is a traveling voucher. That means that whoever has a tenant-based Section 8 voucher, they can take that voucher anywhere and live wherever they qualify for housing. They can take it with them. It doesn't stay with the unit. It stays with the person that holds the voucher, is their voucher. Now, project-based, which is also Section 8, is a fixed voucher for the building. So whoever moves in the building, and the difference is the tenant has the voucher, and a project-based, the owner has the voucher. So in a project-based Section 8 property, the owner of the property has the voucher for the entire building. So if you have 50 units in a building and it has a project-based voucher with HUD, when someone moves in the property, they automatically get Section 8, but you can't take it with you when you leave. The next person that moves in there after you leave also gets Section 8 because it is the owner that carries the voucher. So that's the difference between the two. And I'll leave you to read some other details on that at your leisure. I'm trying to get through these slides and be mindful of the time. And I have about 15 more minutes left on the clock, and I want to try to meet that. Uh, Very important for you to understand eviction laws if you are going to uh, enter into the property management world as a career, as a landlord, or as an investor. Is important to understand eviction because at some point, it's highly likely if you stay in this business long enough that you will have to run into eviction. Uh, Okay, I have a question here that I want to talk about just briefly, just a brief here that I have a question that says, what are the guidelines for renting to traveling nurses? Um, so it depends on what state you are in. So for the sake of California, California has civil laws. It doesn't matter who you're renting to, the law is the law. So you have a lease for someone and they have to abide by the lease. So there's no specific rules for nursing for traveling nurses, but I would say that there is an industry, a corporate industry for traveling nurses. I've rented to traveling nurses too. You typically sign up with the traveling nursing. There's an agency that you contract with, and they place the nurses at your site, and you have a lease with the nursing with the company that outsource the nurses. So there are companies that outsource nurses, and you have your agreement is with them, not with the actual nurse, and they place the nurses at your site. It's the best contract. I really love working with traveling nurses because their company that they're outsourced through when they have to travel, they take care of all of their arrangements, and they pay your deposit, they pay the rent while they're there. They even can outsource the furniture that's needed. They like through court. A court is a big company that traveling nurses use a lot in their organizations, their companies. Court, and then there's also Brooks, and so they come in and they bring in the furniture, and then they take the furniture when the nurses leave, and then the next one comes in for 6 months or a year or less. And so those are really usually they're corporate, considered corporate leases. And so hopefully I answered your question on that. Okay. Uh, Gonna move on. We talked about eviction, the eviction process, and it is a process. Some landlords decide that they want to um, administer their own eviction process to save cost. If you are a landlord and you have a one unit or a couple of units, it's very expensive to hire an attorney. Uh, so a lot of landlords decide that they want to handle their own eviction process. If you decide to do that, make sure you at least talk with an attorney and understand the process. And I haven't seen this process change in years. It's the same. It's been the same. Literally, you give them the notice, 3 day notice here in California. It's different in different states for as 3 day in Ohio, but when we had a property in Minnesota, it was 5 days. If you got a HUD property, it's 10 days. So know what notice that you have to start with, but you start with a notice to vacate. Usually for non-payment of rent is the typical why you're evicting someone. Also it could be lease violations, and that's a covenant. That's a different type of eviction, but it doesn't always have to be based on rent. It can be based on lease violations, and you're going to evict based on lease violations. Then you want to serve an unlawful detainer, proof of service, and then you have your process times. And the tenant has a 5 days to respond to the complaint. And then you can also, which is really popular, is stipulation agreements. I love, love, love stipulation agreements. So this is the thing with that. A stipulation agreement is you have a tenant that is behind in rent. You serve them a notice, and then you have your attorney draw up a contract that says, okay, I'll make payment arrangements with you. And if you miss one of those payment arrangements, I get to automatically skip all of these processes and just go and get a writ and you get out. That's a stipulation agreement. I just told you in 2, 3, 5 seconds. So, of course, learn more about it. Um, and if the tenant doesn't respond, you can kind of move forward to get a writ, and then the judge, I mean, then the sheriff comes out there and you go through a process. Now, it takes months. It can take months to evict here in California. So this is a pro-tenant state. Now, when we're talking about investments, you didn't hear from me, but if you're going to look at investing into multifamily, you're going to work with tenants and you're starting off, look at properties at that's landlord friendly states, such as Ohio. Ohio, if I have a tenant that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, I can get them out in 30 days. Can't do that here. That's just an example. Um, So yeah, so either you win or you lose. But again, in California, it can be a nightmare. So make sure you understand these laws. Again, just moving into closing, we're talking about there are several reasons why in Oakland for eviction, primary is non-payment of rent. I encourage you to make sure you document everything. It's really important to keep your books good, clean. Whenever you have a conversation with that tenant, have a log, a communication log, or send an email or something in writing so you can both understand what has been said because it can come back and bite you. And professional operations of your property is very necessary. Um, and always be professional and make sure you have wrongful eviction coverage, which I don't see a lot, but that is if for some reason you make a mistake because the judge doesn't want to hear, I don't know, then you can not lose your property and you can have insurance that can cover those costs. And you also have landlord organizations that will help you and give you some support. Not all of we hear a lot of these agencies that support tenants' rights, but they also support landlord rights. They want landlords to understand the laws and the tenants to and the landlords to get along, and so it benefits everybody if we're able to actually do that. I want to close out with talking about maintenance of the property and preventative maintenance schedules. Um, preventative maintenance is very important. This is how you make sure that you're protecting your asset. So a lot of times a tenant will call you with a complaint and we say, oh, something's broken. We got a leak. Something is going on. And then, we're irritated because the tenant called us. Well, yes, it is not not what you really want to hear, but you do want to hear it because you want to be on top of all your repairs. I'll tell you that a lot of tenants will not call the landlord when they have an issue. They just let it go. First, especially if they caused it. And the long run, it hurts you because if you have water that's been dripping, this has happened to me. I had a tenant that had a faucet. He never reported the faucet. I was behind on my annual inspection and he was letting it just drip, drip, drip. So I ended up having to replace all of, because he let it was just rot and wet underneath the sink. And I had to replace all of that. Had he just said, my faucet is leaking, I would have had the faucet repaired and I would have all that other damage. So it's important to um, have annual inspections of your properties and walk your properties and make sure everything is working properly, not only to benefit the tenant, but to benefit you too and make everybody happy. There are preventative maintenance plans that you can Google and find, or you can make your own up that just going to identify what is needed and how to avoid unplanned maintenance interruptions. So if you have a maintenance plan, if for instance your boilers, if you know your boilers are coming to the life cycle, if their life cycle is 15 years and you're in year 14, you should look at getting some proposals to replace the boiler. Otherwise, the boiler will break and then if the boiler costs thousands of dollars, you may not have that money set aside, and then you're in a financial stress. You're stressing. So that's a whole nother subject. I think I'm going to give just a special um, class on just maintenance for the property, because I can't tell you how important that is to maintain your property. The biggest enemy is water, plumbing, huge cost, very common, plumbing. And so, and long-term damage is what I just explained to you that happened to me. If you're not on top of it, you don't get regular inspections, if you don't maintain your property, as well as keep it clean and upgrade your landscaping, important also for the health and wellness of everybody around it. Landscaping is important and very uh, uh, important for health reasons. Another webinar. Hiring contractors, please, I encourage you that if you are hiring a contractor and you're paying over $500, they must be licensed in California, period. Other states have where I believe that's across the state. I just saw something on television where a contractor was actually not only fined but taken to jail for scamming people because he was charging over what the state law said that he can charge as a contractor. And so avoid rushing into repairs. Make sure you review all of your contracts, all of your bids, all of your invoicing, and just checks and balances, and make sure all your project materials and expectations are spelled out, just as I said. Make sure your contractor is cleaning up their mess. I get that a lot, and I had to put that in there because I found that a lot of them just leave and then you have to clean up the mess. Details, documentation, be prepared for that. I'll have you read this slide on your own. It's just about relationships are important and create success. That's pricing every job. So when you start building relationships, you can actually start saving costs. And when you have a great contractor or a vendor that you love working with and they can work on other properties, you want to build your relationship because labor is short and it's expensive. So it's very important that you vet your contractors. On-site property managers, again, in California, 16 units requires legally on-site managers. We also want to be careful when you're paying your managers because there's certain laws that's attached to the salary and how you pay. They're considered employees. Even when you have a unit that you're offering in lieu of the salary, there is certain regulations and requirements to paying that. So you don't want that to come back and hit you with labor laws, employment labor law. So be careful about that. Good managers, because the managers we got a bad rap. I just have to admit, in property management, I complain about property management companies all the time. So I pride myself in being one of the best property management companies in California, in Ohio, and in Philadelphia. Thank you very much. Good property managers, they need to be able to listen and communicate and be proactive with their tenants. Not hide and when your tenant is trying to get a hold of you, you're running from them, you're hiding from them. You're not being responsible, keeping the property up, well maintained. You're not processing the maintenance request. You're taking a long time repairing certain items. They ask you for a form. It's a week later. They still haven't received it. Make sure you stay on top of your business. Your residents will love you. And you'll love them. And then a lot of times, your most problematic tenant that's always calling you is usually your best tenant. They tell me everything. Okay. We talked a little bit more about on-site managers, smaller properties. They usually can't afford, full-time employer and they have to self-manage. If you have 2 units and you want to self-manage, then you should definitely be abreast of the laws and how, and I'm glad you're attending this webinar so you can get a feel for what is property management, the life of a property manager, and it's a really wide range of industries that fall into property management, but also, again, consult with an attorney, someone that specializes in housing laws. If you decide that you're going to manage on your own, Real estate license is required if you're going to lease in California. A lot of people don't know that. If you sign a lease in California, you should have a real estate license, unless you are the landlord. Like it's your property, you own the property. If you don't, and say for instance, you hire somebody else that's going to lease your property for you, like a broker or someone, they should be licensed. So that's another area a lot of people are get confused about. Property management companies can be great because they will tenants will usually pay on time, they'll rent longer, less wear and tear on your units, and they'll cause less problems. So a lot of companies will have shorter vacancy cycles because property management company, this is what they do. So they usually have a system in place that they can use to help you minimize your risk, keep your tenants in place, have a rent collection policy, enforce the house rules, and increase your value on your property. Tell you when they make recommendations for any repair, any upgrades that can also increase your value and in your property. They also they keep you safe and in compliance, so you don't get in any trouble and get any fines. And then they also keep your records pretty nicely. Okay, that concludes. I'm right on time. Look at that. That concludes my webinar for property management. I hope that you enjoyed that, and feel free. I'm going to put my information, my email in the box and the chat. And then if you want to ask me further questions, you can do that. Also, if you will please visit, just 1 minute, I'm having a hard time getting in the chat room. Why am I locked? Now I'm locked out of the chat room. I don't know. Okay. Please visit our website at swbdelivers.org. Learn more about what we do. Refer folks to us. Come to our events. We would love to have you. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm not sure if that went in there or not. Okay. Oh, here we go. I think I was doing it wrong. Again, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional information. There you go. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you at the next webinar. Good night.